Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, today the water issue is an indisputable component in all climate negotiation processes. Just like all issues related to the discussion of the water issue, they all overlap with issues of combating climate change and are closely linked. These trends have especially intensified since 2023, when the institutionalization of this entire agenda began to actively take shape. I would like to explain the situation in 2 or 3 words. All issues are initially laid out on the international agenda under a plausible pretext. At the same time, as we can see, often the collective West eventually leads to the filling of other national budgets. Direct rules are being introduced that discredit global trade through unilateral measures and under the plausible pretext of environmental protection. We are already witnessing this during the negotiation process, when we study all the negotiation tracks in detail, when we consider literally all the phrases that conceal things that do not appear at first glance.
For example, we are currently preparing for the next event with all sorts of formulations that, at first glance, when you read them, absolutely relate to the formats of the environmental track. But when you see further where it leads, what it leads to,
Yes, clarifications. We see that these measures often lead to restrictions on state sovereignty, especially in developing countries, especially those countries that, if we are dealing with water issues, have extensive access to fishing stocks, other reserves, and mineral resources. The issues of the shelf, the transboundary regulation of internal watercourses, and interstate rivers, which are the natural border of states, are currently acute. Institutionalization is also underway there. At the same time, we see that there is an urgent need to implement some elements in our country so that, following the example of the climate agenda, at some point we do not have to adapt to the methods and mechanisms that Western countries have created,
without considering our interests.
Yes, absolutely. For example, the ministers of the OECD countries with the Global Water Justice Agenda met in Madrid. At the same time, no other countries were invited to this meeting. Therefore, these elements, which are currently being conducted on water resources, should not be ignored. I suggest that at the initial stage, during the period of their formation, we offer our own methods, which, fortunately, we also have our own mechanisms of interaction. We could start with transboundary rivers and those watercourses that we use together. These are our large lakes, seas, and rivers, which, I believe, now need to be extensively reviewed so that we can eventually establish the parameters of the ecological flow of rivers at the very beginning. And then we must influence our partners so that we have proper monitoring in common. Because we must take our interest into account and think about it in advance. Choose a dialogue option that would suit our partners in principle, but would not forget about our interests, but would protect them at the modern level, taking into account mainly the requirements of the environmental agenda as a whole, but without forgetting about the interests of our citizens. The well-being of millions of Russian families depends on compliance with environmental regulations. We must not forget about this. The problem of water resources is becoming more and more acute for us. Thank God everything is fine with us, but for our environment, for the CIS countries, it is a very acute issue. We have certain competitive advantages here, and we need to use them effectively.